Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from Virginia. Let's get into it. Story 1. One time when I was like 10, I was trying to go to sleep. I had just come home from an Iron Maiden concert. It was like 12:30 at night. I'm trying to sleep and I'm counting the time to pass it. So then it's like 1:33 before I know it, and I hear this music playing. It was LaGrange by ZZ Top, playing on my MP3 player. It was faint, but I look at it and say to myself, I turned this off yesterday morning, but I decide it was nothing, so I try to go back to sleep. But at about 2:15, I hear a drumming noise. Then I heard this cranking noise coming from my brother's room. He was 13 at the time. So then I hear this strange combination of sounds. It sounded like a mix of everything I had just heard, but with a scream, a screeching of metal, a groan, and a growl. So this scared the absolute crap out of me. It was like 3:10, and I had to go to the bathroom. I'd been holding it since the beginning of the concert at around 8. I don't want to go, because wetting the bed sounds like a better option than possibly dying from whatever this noise was. And it was about 4 when I finally did go. So our bathroom is kind of spooky, and I opened the door. Then I was in the bathroom completely, no turning back now. I look in every corner, but there was nothing there. So the bathroom was kind of weird. It was a 2-room bathroom. One section with a sink, and the next room with a toilet and a shower and a bathtub. And I used the bathroom, and I saw a big pair of blood red eyes and the outline of a dark figure in the one place I didn't check, the shower. And this was especially creepy because the concert I went to, Iron Maiden, yeah, because they sing about Satan and death and creepy stuff like that. But naturally I ran to my parents' room, then they checked it out, but nothing was there. Instead it was total bullcrap. But I know what I saw. It was really traumatizing because, well, I was only 10 years old. Anyways, if anyone knows what could have done this, let me know. It could have been my mind playing tricks on me, but I don't think it was. Story 2. 2 weeks ago, me and my sister were exploring the woods behind our new house. It was pretty boring, but breathtaking in a way. There was a little creek that ran from the front of the woods to the rest of the houses, and beautiful willow trees. Me and my sister dipped our feet into the cold water and had lots of fun. But this is only the start of when things got weird. It was 7 p.m. and getting dark, so my sister decided we should head back for the house. I agreed, so we started walking back. I'm not sure why, but I felt like we were being watched. I looked behind me, and far in the distance I could make out the shape of a human, but like a shadow figure. I couldn't tell if it was walking to us, so I asked my sister to stop for a second. I explained to her that I think we're being watched. She, quite startled by this, asked me why I think so. I pointed out in the distance where the figure was still standing. Alexa, my sister, told me we need to get to the house and she'll explain it. I didn't know why we were in such a hurry, but I ran with her to the safety of our house. We locked the back door and sat in the living room. A minute later, of hard breathing, Alexa explained that the thing we saw was a ghost that we possibly led to our house. I shrugged my shoulders. Honestly, I didn't care all that much. Just a spirit wandering around our house. I didn't mind. I'd like to say my sister was right. The next day was very weird. My family woke up at around 6 a.m. hearing a woman scream help, although no one was there that we knew of. Basically, we all experienced something that day. Our mom was cooking breakfast and went to the restroom when she heard a loud bang and came back to see pots and pans all over the floor. Our dad was listening to his radio while drinking coffee, and the radio oddly kept changing channels, although no one was touching it. My younger sister Sophia was watching TV, and the TV kept changing channels, oddly enough, but she claimed to not have done anything. And then when my older twin sister Alexa went outside, she said that there was a floaty in the pool moving by itself. I was alone in the dining room, the lights flickered, but no one was around. So I hope you enjoyed this weird story. If you have any questions, don't mind asking me. Story 3. So basically, back when I was around 8, I had lots of paranormal experiences at my elementary school, which started my fascination with paranormal activity. I forgot the name of the school because that was back when I was living in Ohio, and I have moved to Virginia about 3 weeks ago. So technically, these are things I've noticed at my school that I kept a notebook of. On October 5th, 2017, I was going to the restroom. There was multiple girl bathrooms in the school, but I went to the one I found the creepiest. It was the creepiest because that's where most of the experiences happened. So I went into the stall, and after a minute or two, I heard footsteps. I thought that it was just someone else, till I realized if it was someone else, you would have heard the door swing open and noise from the halls and classrooms, although I never did. When I got out of the stall, I turned to the door and realized it was open. When I mean open, it was just standing open, not moving anywhere. The door I'm talking about are the ones that don't stay open. They'll just close and you'd have to hold it open to stay open. But no one was there. Although yet again, I thought someone was holding it from the outside of the bathroom, and I just couldn't see them behind the door. So for this very reason, I said hello, but no one answered and the door closed. I ran over to the door as quick as I could and pushed it open. No one was there. There's no possible way to hide in a second. I don't know what I experienced, but I know it wasn't normal. On December 13th, 2017, it was after school. I was doing a play tryout for my school. It was around 5 p.m., so things got dark real fast. Me and my friends were talking and practicing lines when we both noticed a child's laughter. Possibly belonged to a little girl around 5 years maybe. We looked over at everyone else, who looked confused. We heard the child laugh again. Now we knew it wasn't anyone there. I heard a few sixth graders talking quietly to one another and pointing to the stage. I noticed the curtains on the stage oddly moving. Some sixth graders went over to the stage. I followed because I wanted in on the action. Someone moved the curtain a little to see if it was someone playing a trick on us. The child's laughter started again, and I could almost see an outline of the little girl. We walked away from the stage quite confused of what we saw. On March 3rd, 2017, I was alone walking in the office with a note from my teacher that she asked me to give to the office. This will be short and weird, but for reasons I'll explain that in this school, we have a basement that is right across from the office. Now basically, as I was walking to the office, I noticed the scream of a woman coming from the basement. The scream was dreadful, and when I went to sleep that night, I heard a woman scream from outside my window too. Story 4. I've had many unexplainable phenomena happen to and around me over the years. This particular extraordinary event occurred in November of 2007 in Norfolk, Virginia. My husband and I were living in a small 1950s home that we were in the process of renovating until the day we sold it, and I was around 4 months pregnant with our son. The backstory on our house is that it was owned by the Grays prior to my husband buying it in 1999. We do not know exact dates, but we know that Mr. Gray passed first and that Mrs. Gray took her final breaths in that house in 1998. There was not much notable activity, but occasionally you could feel a feminine presence. It was disapproving sometimes and would hover watching us when we got up to the early 20s antics of partying. On one occasion, the dog door flap swung back and forth for half an hour. Our dog Shadow was in the room with me, and there was no wind strong enough to move our dog door flap big enough for a Rottweiler. It freaked me out, but Shadow was calm, and she was a coward, so I told myself it was fine. I owned a small business at the time, and we were gearing up for the holiday season. My mother-in-law had unexpectedly passed a month prior, and my husband was still numb. I was trying to carry the bills, a child, and a grieving husband through the retail rush. He was working construction and left earlier in the morning than I did most days. In a hurry to get out of the house and open my store, I locked my keys in the house. My husband was at work already, and I needed to open my store on time or the mall would charge a fine. I was an emotional wreck with trying to work through the combination of loss and pregnancy, so there I was standing next to my car, looking up at the sky, about to break down sobbing. It was all wrong. I shouldn't be shoving down my excitement about my pregnancy because my husband needed me. His mom shouldn't be dead. It shouldn't be on the brink of Black Friday. I wanted a break. I just needed to be in the house and get my keys. The back door was probably unlocked, but jumping a 6-foot fence while pregnant was a last case scenario. I started to walk back up the path to the front steps and stopped. Choking back a sob and blinking to fight my tears, I looked down and there was a key at my feet. A house key. Not on a keychain. We didn't have any extra keys. I can't tell you if it was left there by Mrs. Gray or by Brian's mom, but it was everything I needed right then. I picked it up and it was the key to my front door. The key felt like a literal symbol that there was hope and that I was not doing this alone. Story 5. A few weeks ago, I had gone to sleep with my LED light on a bright setting. My mom decided they were too bright and came in my room and changed them without waking me up. I usually sleep with my covers on top of me since I feel uneasy about my closet in my room. I opened my eyes to something laying on top of my stomach. Confused, I sat up, but nothing was there. Everything was the exact same except for my LED lights, which were dimmed. I checked the time and it was around 11:30 p.m. I went back to sleep in a daze. When I woke up the next morning, I asked my mom if she had come in my room. To my confusion, she said all she had done was change my light color. Since my dad wasn't awake yet, I waited downstairs. When he finally awoke, I asked him the same thing. He said that he hadn't even come near my room. After that, I was absolutely confused. My parents just laughed my panic off and still do whenever I bring it up. I get a feeling of being watched from my closet whenever I have the cover over my head. When I sit up, I still feel a sense of being watched, but not as much as before. Whenever I'm doing anything in my room, I have a feeling to look over my shoulder at my closet. The more I think about it, I think I might be overthinking, although I know what I'm feeling at night. Even now, my parents think I'm just playing around when I say that I feel uncomfortable in my own room, so I've come here for help. Would burning sage help, or is this bigger situation than just burn sage and you're good? Story 6. My husband Sean and I, as newlyweds, relocated to a little house in Weber City, Virginia, in January 2014. We were so excited to move into this house as we were leasing to own. My mom assisted us in the move, and we couldn't have been prouder of being homeowners. It was such a beautiful little starter home. It was located practically at the base of a mountain in the woods, located on the Trail of Tears. Within the first week, the activity began. I was training as a CNA at a local nursing home in the area, and I got up early one morning as I had been for my classes. It was around 5:30 in the morning, and I was in the bathroom blow drying my hair with the door open. It was a small bathroom, so I left the door open so I wouldn't get hot. As I held my head upside down and tossed my hair in the dryer around, I caught a glimpse of someone in an old-timey pioneer woman dress float directly next to me into my bedroom. Confused and not understanding what I had just seen, I stopped what I was doing and walked into the bedroom where my husband was sleeping. I couldn't explain what had just happened. I was at a total loss for words. I mentioned what had happened to friends and family, and most just laughed. When I told my mother, she mentioned to me that the house next door had been on a paranormal television show, and supposedly it was known for being extremely haunted. I laughed it off and didn't think much of it. I was wrong to ever act so nonchalant. We found out we were pregnant with our firstborn, Harper, shortly after moving into the home. Things were great for a while. We had a baby on the way. I had decided to take time and stay home while pregnant. One night I remember my husband had went to sleep before me. I was sitting in the living room watching TV, and we had 3 dogs at the time, and I whistled for them to come out of the bedroom and come into the living room with me. I whistled, and all of a sudden I heard a whistle right back. I got up and walked to the bedroom to see if my husband was awake, and he was fast asleep. I got that eerie feeling like someone was watching me and stayed up most of the night. There were many moments in the home where you would hear people speaking in the house very low. I can only explain it like a diner and how it can be during an early morning rush. Multiple conversations just going nonstop. We can hear it all throughout the night while we laid in the bed and attempted to sleep. My husband was a bit of a skeptic prior to living in this house. You could also lay in our bed at night and see shadows speed from the dining room to the living room. It got to be quite disturbing at night when we laid down and we both just thought our eyes were playing tricks on us. The activity was fairly frequent, but nothing too extreme at first. Now I know seeing someone walk by me is pretty extreme, but not when you lived in this house. Eventually, we got pregnant again with Charlotte and became a family of 4. My husband's cousins, Thomas, needed a place to stay and moved in with us. We joked with him about the house next door being haunted and told him about the weird things that occurred in our home. My husband, being the practical joker he is, thought it'd be funny to buy a satanic Bible and read and poke fun at the things in it. He liked to taunt people or things on occasion. One night he decided he'd go next door and summon whatever was in that house to come to him. No one was living in the home at the time. Usually the residents didn't last longer than a few months. As soon as he got done summoning whatever it was in that house, he became violently ill and ran back home, getting sick in the yard. After that, things went downhill. There were times when you can go outside and see the light randomly come on upstairs in the house next door, and no one was there. We know this because my husband and his friends went over to find out if someone was there. They knocked for a while and no one came to the door. They came back to the porch and the light went off. It was strange. We went back in our house and came back out to smoke about 30 minutes later, and the light came back on. We would see shadows all the time outside as well. So much just kept going on. After the Satanic Bible incident, my husband, myself, and the girls were asleep in the bed. I remember waking up feeling someone's hands touching me inappropriately, and I thought it was my husband. I remember laughing and saying stop. When I opened my eyes, I was looking at him with both of the girls laying on and against him. I immediately froze in fear and went catatonic. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything. I remember feeling the tears running down my face, and with everything in me, I knew someone was behind me. It's like I was screaming in my head for my husband to wake up, but nothing came out. Finally, it's like whatever was touching me released me and I shot up crying. I was so shook by that moment. I had never had anything like that happen to me. I felt so violated. My husband, being my husband, just laughed and assumed I had been dreaming and poked fun at me about it. I labeled the next incident as the big night because it was just that. One night my husband, his cousin, and myself were hanging out. The girls were already in bed. We were up late and it was so cold outside. I remember having to wear a jacket when I went outside and smoked, and I could see my breath, it was that cold. I came back in from the back porch after smoking and looked out my dining room window toward the haunted house. In the yard, they had a concrete table and a bench, and to my surprise, in the freezing cold, there were 3 people sitting at the table, and a lantern was lit over their head. A tall man and his face was so distorted I couldn't make it out. He was wearing overalls and kept shaking oddly. A dark blonde woman and an old woman in a long black robe or a dress. Now I wouldn't have thought it too strange, but the lantern was just hanging in midair from nothing, and it was freezing cold outside and they were just sitting there. I shouted for my husband and his cousin, another skeptic, and they both were shocked and in disbelief. We couldn't believe our eyes. I ran to the back porch and looked at the table and no one was there. I thought I was going crazy. I ran back in and there they were again. I went to my front porch and I could still see them. Again, back to the porch, and they were gone. It's like the only place I could see them was from my dining room and front porch. My husband's cousin, Thomas, was in shock and refused to look anymore and went back into the living room scared of what he was seeing. I remember asking him, "Are you seeing this? The same thing I'm seeing?" He replied, "Yes, but I don't want to admit it to myself." I waved at the people sitting there, and they waved back. I did this frequently throughout the night, until finally around 4 a.m., the blonde female flipped me off. At around 6, they disappeared. It was the craziest thing I had ever seen, and I've never seen anything like it since. One day, the woman that owned the house next door came over and asked my husband if he could help change the locks on her house because new people were moving in. He went over and helped, and she proceeded to tell him her brother had lived in the house and practiced the occult and was into some pretty heavy stuff. He had Parkinson's and always wore overalls. He immediately thought of the man we'd seen that night sitting at the table outside. She then told him her brother shot himself upstairs in the middle of a pentagram. My husband was very disturbed by this. We both swear it was her brother we saw that night at the table outside. We lived there for a few years, and it was almost like the place was draining our relationship, turning us against one another, and causing severe damage to our marriage. We decided to part ways, and I relocated to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to be closer to my mother, who had moved down a year after I moved into that house. Leaving that house was the best decision we ever made. My husband and I reconciled and are happier than ever here in South Carolina with both of our girls. One evening we were watching TV, and this show pops up on Hulu called Paranormal State. An episode labeled The Devil's Nest comes on. That's episode 20, season 3. We began watching, and we were shocked by what we were seeing. As they drove up our old road, our old hill, you could see our house as they pulled into the driveway of the house next door and began their investigation of the Devil's Nest. My husband was in shock and stated that this just put everything together he'd experienced, because he wrote it off as he was just going crazy. One scene in the show, the resident states she was assaulted in her sleep by something there that made things just come together for me. My husband was at that point in shock and dismay by what had actually happened to me. We both feel for whoever lives in either house, because we don't feel like it's the houses. We feel like it's the land, and it is a permanent stain that will never be lifted. I'm so glad we moved away from there, but we will always remember the horrible and shocking events that happened while living there. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.